Hey everyone, I'm Vikas from SmallAcademy and welcome to another video. In the last video, we implemented a details view for our channels and we added the features to display the description and the social links of the channel. And in this video, we're going to play the video from the URL. Okay, so let's go to our details page here. And I'm going to close all this because we don't need any of this. Now we do have this player view and we're going to utilize the player view to play the URL. Okay, so I will create the new method here to play the video or play the channel. So public, this method is going to take the URL of the channel to play. So live URL. All right. Now inside this we'll play the video. Okay, now before we start writing the code, let's go to the documentation of the Exoplayer and see how we can play the URL. So let's go to the exoplayer.dev and go to hello world, and here we have the instruction to create the player. Create the instance of simple Exoplayer and create new Exoplayer. So let's copy this first. Let's go here and paste it here, and I'm going to import the simple Exoplayer, and we need context. We'll replace that with this. Now we need to attach the player to the view. So we already have the player view, right? So if we go back to our Android Studio, we do have the player view, so we'll attach the player view here. So to attach the player view, I can call the player view and we'll set the player to player. Okay, let's go back here and check how to prepare the player. So first thing we need is the media item. So let's copy this line of code to create the media item. So let's go back to our Android Studio, paste it here. Let's import the classes, and we're going to import the classes from Exoplayer 2. Now we need to pass the live URL here. Now let's go back here, and now we need to set the media item. So let's copy all these line of code here, and I'll remove this. Now what we're doing here is we are setting the media item to our player. So we have this player class here, instance of simple Exoplayer, and we need to prepare the player, and finally we'll play the player. Okay, so to test this, let's copy this method here and pass the URL from the onCreate method. So we'll get the URL from channel.getLiveURL. So we are just testing the player here, if our player is working or not. We'll customize this player later, but let's go ahead and run this application to check if we are able to play the URL or not. We got our channels here, so I'm going to click on this global news. Okay, and now here you can see we are able to play this channel. We can pause, play, we can even click on next. Okay, so but in our application I have removed all these next and previous button, and I have added the full screen here. Okay, so to be able to do that, we need to create the custom controller for this. So let's go ahead and create the custom controller first. So I'm going to pause this, and right now let me show you one interesting thing. Okay, here you can see if I go to home, it's keep on playing. Okay, so whenever we are at the home, even the activity is not present, not active here, still the channel is playing. So we need to fix that as well. So now let's go ahead and create the custom controller for our player. So to create the custom controller, we will create new layout resource here. So I will create new custom player control. Okay, and now I will add the codes to create the custom controller, and I already have the code that is written to create the custom controller. So I will leave the GitHub link in the description and you can go and copy from there. So let me go to my GitHub here and copy the code. So I'll go to my GitHub, find my guests, and here we have this exocontrolview.xml file. So I will leave that link in the description so you can directly copy and paste from there. So I'll copy this layout, go back to our Android Studio, go to code view, and paste the code. And here you can see this is the controller for our player. We have a skip button and play and pause, and most importantly we have this full screen button which is having the ID as exo full screen icon. Now we will set this custom controller to our player view. So let's go to the activity details where our player view is present, and I will add the custom controller layout ID, and I will select my custom layout. I'll also select the default player layout, so player layout ID, and we have this Exoplayer view which is comes by default with the library, so you don't need to create it. Okay, now let's run this application here and check if we can access the new custom layout in our player view. Okay, our app is running. Let me open the channel here. And now you can see we are having this new layout with the new custom controller, and we also have this full screen button. Okay, so to implement this full screen button, we can click on, what I want to do is I want to extract the XML resources and handle the click on this full screen view. So let's go to our details here, and I will create the image view for that full screen. Okay, and to keep track of the player view, we need to create one boolean here. I will create boolean is full screen variable and set it as false, and we will use this boolean to keep track of the window. So if the player window is already in full screen mode, then we will set this as true, and if the player screen is in normal mode, we will set this as false. So by default the player screen is at the normal mode, so we are setting this false as by default. Okay, so let me get the XML resources for the full screen. So full screen, find view id r.id.full screen icon. Okay, but this full screen is present inside this custom player view, right? So we have to reference that through player view. So let me add player view dot find view id. If you don't use this player view, you are going to get some error, okay, or your application is going to crash with the null reference. Now we'll handle the click on this full screen, and we'll do that using the on click listener. So we'll set the new on click listener here. So whenever this full screen is clicked, we'll just display the toast message for now. Now let's go and run this application again just to check. Okay, if I click on full screen, now you can see the full screen message. Okay, so let me show you how this full screen logic is going to work. Okay, so now here I want to check the condition is full screen mode is true or not, and based on that condition we will set the mode of our player. Okay, let's say user click on this full screen button, right, that present in our player view here. User click on the full screen button, and if we are already in full screen button, we will revert back the user to normal mode, right? And if user click on full screen button and if this condition is false, that means we are already in normal mode and user wants to go to the full screen mode. So we have to change the condition here. So here what I'll do is, if the user is already in full screen mode, I will set the full screen mode equals to false, so that next time when user click on full screen mode, we will just execute the normal mode. And if the user is in normal mode and click on full screen button, we will send the user to the full screen mode. Okay, so that's why I'm setting this is full screen equals to false and is full screen equals to true. Okay, so I hope you got the logic that I'm trying to use here, and I will display the message for now. So if the user already in full screen mode, if the player is already in full screen mode and user click on the full screen button, I will display we are now going back to normal mode. Okay, because player was in full screen mode and user click on the full screen button, that means user wants to go back to the normal mode. And if the condition is opposite, we are going to full screen mode. Okay, now let's run this application and check this logic. So go back here, open the channel. Okay, Now we are in normal mode, right? So whenever I click on this button here, it should display that we are going to full screen mode. So it says we are going to full screen mode. Now if I click on this button again, it should display we are going back to normal mode. Okay, our logic is working correctly now. Okay, so here now I want to implement the code, make this player view, make the player view full screen, and make the player view go back to normal screen here. Okay, so we'll write the code now. So let's write the code to send the user to full screen mode here. Okay, so here it says we are going to full screen mode, right? So I want to write a code to send the user to the full screen mode here. And to send the user to the full screen mode, what we'll do is we will hide the UI here. Okay, we'll hide all the UI and send it to the full screen. Okay, so to hide the UI, we'll get the window, we'll get the decor view, we will set the flag to hide the system UI, set the system UI visibility, and here we will set the flags to hide the UI and make the full screen. So we'll call the view and we'll set the flag system UI flag full screen. We'll set one more view dot system UI flag immersive sticky and one more flag to hide the navigation. So view dot will hide the navigation. Okay, and these flags are going to hide the toolbar and navigation. Okay, and we'll also hide the toolbar here. So if get support action bar is not null, we'll hide the action bar. Now we will set the orientation to landscape, set request orientation, and using the activity info we will change the orientation to landscape. Okay, so now we are getting the layout params from the constant view and we are making the player view to extend to the match parent. Okay, so that's why we are getting the params here through the layout params, and we are setting the width to match parent and height to match parent of our player view. So that's why it's going to expand when we click on the full screen button, and it's going to make that cover the whole screen. Okay, so this is the code. Let me comment that to make the screen full screen, and to exit the full screen we need to reverse all the code that we have written here. So we'll make the system UI visible first, and after that we'll make the system UI visible. After that we will set the orientation to portrait, and finally we will revert back to our original layout. Okay, so here you can see we are getting the layout params from our constant view for the player view that we have in our layout. Okay, so our player view is present inside this constant view, so that's why we are referencing using the constant view, and we are changing the width of player view to the match parent, and we are changing the height of the player view using this logic here. So we are getting the display matrix and we are setting the height. Okay, and finally we are setting the layout parameters to this player view. And actually guys, I got this code from the Stack Overflow, so I will leave the link in the description for the original source code if possible. Okay, so I actually did not write this code, I found this code in the Stack Overflow. So if you want to check that original code, you can go there and check it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run this to make sure that it is working. So open our channel here and let me click on full screen
as they go through those keys.
Okay, now you can see it is not working correctly, so let me go ahead and see. Okay, so the problem here is that we try to set this screen orientation without specifying the screen orientation in our Android manifest file here, so we have to change that first. So I'm going to add some config changes here. So we are hiding the keyboard, we are changing the orientation, and we are setting the screen size. After setting this configuration here, we can change the layout parameter of our constant view and the player view in the details view here. So let's go ahead and run this again and open any of this channel here. Now if you click on the full screen, it's going to work as expected. So that was the problem there. This is the end of this part, and in the next part we're going to improve this code here. So we are trying to play the HLS URL directly here. So instead of playing like this, instead of creating the media item, we actually need to create the data source using the data factory class, and after that we need to convert that to the HLS URL, and we'll play that using the player. So we'll do that in the next video.